we have to have the political will to say, we want a great education for every child. And it cannot simply be through program cuts and getting rid of neighborhood schools and abrogating our responsibility to privatization schemes that do not show that much better.
First of all, I know we agree on the fact that every school needs to be a great school. I'm a big believer in choice, but even if you build an amazing school a mile away, for some parents, the school on the corner is a school of choice. So making sure that every school works for every family, I think, is fundamental what we have to do as a system. Now, getting there, I think, is going to take some will, some effort and change. One is that for us, in our strategy, it's been about the principle, the building level leadership. Great teachers matter a lot, but we know that even good teachers won't stay in a place that doesn't have good leadership.
This is political, it is rhetoric, it has nothing to do with our quality. We want quality education for our students. The longer school day is coming, we want to plan for that. We want to make sure that our children get the best that they're entitled to get. And it shouldn't be just whatever zip code you live in, that you're entitled to something different from someone else. We want quality education. We want art and music and PE and civics. I cannot tell you how heartbreaking it is to have a student come to you and say, I have never done science. Because we were so busy doing math and reading that, brilliant kids that had no access to science in elementary school. There's something wrong with that.
So a longer school day, I think, will get us to a lot of these places that we're talking about, the arts, the music, the enrichment, the more math, the more literacy. You know, when I was in New York, we were fighting for 200-day school years because we thought 185 wasn't long enough. And here we're fighting for parity, for equity. So I find that fascinating. But we do agree in a lot of the stuff that we're talking about in terms of creating a much better school day for our kids.
What is the evidence that a longer school day translates to better performance?
So there's again, in this world, there is no magic bullet. There is no panacea. But what the longer school day will do is actually get you, get the tools you need to get the stuff done. So when you look at, there was research done in Massachusetts that looked at extended learning time. So schools that had a longer school day versus a shorter school day. Now, all else being equal, the longer school day schools did much better than the other ones.
Massachusetts, no lie zone. Come on, we're having a no lie zone. There was no significant difference in that study. I looked at that study, Jean-Claude, because I knew you brought it up. I saw that little fibby poster that you did. Come on, let's not do another one, because that one, I have the research. We have to have a real plan about how we're going to deal with poverty in this city and in this country, period. We have to have a real change of mind about this, because we criminalize poverty, we make people ashamed to be poor. There's something wrong when we have all of this money flowing in one direction and people are being told, make do with less, be heroic with less, do all of these things with less. And I think the question is, are we going to turn this mirror around and look at ourselves, and those of us who have more than others, are we going to make a real decision about how money is appropriated and distributed and organized?
Is CPS providing enough good school options to retain and grow our middle class population?
We've got to make sure, and that's the work for us, and making sure every neighborhood school is actually a school of choice. One we keep, not just the middle class, but for those parents who don't know how to access the system. If they go down the block to a school, they're in a good school. So that's the work, I think, for us over the next few years.
Okay, so I want to talk about this, and it's going to get a little bit more difficult, because I think we need to have a reality check about what Chicago is. It's a very segregated city. It's a very, it's also very interestingly developed and underdeveloped in certain areas, and some of that was planned, quite frankly. I know people don't want to hear that, and it's difficult, and but it is what it is. So here's what happens. And in order to attract middle-class parents, we had this whole concept of let's do magnet schools, let's do things, and having those schools actually had unintended consequences. So in neighborhoods where you had a variety of role models and issues, where you have children that are very high achieving and children that are low achieving, but there was a mixture of that. So children had ideas of other ways of doing things. When we started with Decatur and other schools that are selective enrollment, the cream got actually taken out of those schools. So what was left were schools that are not attractive to middle-class parents. And that is an unfortunate consequence of having really super great schools. So one cannot just look, and I'm glad he said this, because let's listen to everything he said. He said very clearly that the longer time in itself is not the panacea. Now, when you bring in Noble Street and Uno, you also have to realize then, we're talking about schools that are allowed to push out students that don't meet the criteria, or never allowed to get in the first place. You have special ed, you have high populations of special ed, you have high populations of English language learners. I mean, look, the traditional public school, we take all, and we embrace all of it. So that's why it is extraordinarily important that we put things in perspective. So while the issue of a longer school day has mixed results. Some places show very interesting results. Some places show no results. The fact is that it is not an answer in itself, and it's a quality of what goes on during that school day that's equally important.
All right, question for each of you on this. For 7 schools, teachers in 7 schools have now voted to do this on their own. Principals support it. You're taking legal action to prevent those teachers from doing something they haven't voted for. Why?
All right, because first of all, waivers happen every year across the city, and they are something that is generated in individual schools with delegates and principals working together to say, this is what we want to do at our school. That is not what happened here. CPS's law department had a big giant waiver that is a universal waiver. It asks to waive, why do we have to ask to possibly waive your nationally board certified teacher stipend? Why is that part of the waiver? I just have so many issues with the fact that this was done without information being provided to us. It's not about, we want a longer school day and we want this extra money. There were things that were associated with that waiver. But what's also interesting is how this has been done, because schools across the city have said no to this, so they haven't had the waiver vote. So we can say, oh, you know, there have been no no's to this. Yes, there have been quite a few schools that have said, this is not what we want to do. And it is bargaining with our members directly. This is illegal behavior. This is one place where he and I are going to absolutely disagree. And it bothers me because I should have known it was coming, because I actually got told by the teachers union president in Rochester that when you don't like what happens when you bark, you go around to other people. And that's wrong, Jean-Claude. C'est terrible.
Okay, let's
The one thing we don't want to do is compare Chicago to Rochester. So there's 2 very different goals. That's number one. Number 2, let's talk about the process for making this happen. The provision in the contract has existed in Chicago for many years. The exact same system exists in New York City.
No, it's not.
When you're looking at ways schools can actually waive parts of the contract. So when this first began, my call to Karen was we should stand together to make sure that everyone is following what was negotiated contractually. So when you've got teachers who are making decisions at the local level, and the vote is led and conducted by the union delegate, not by the principal. Yes, it is. Look, the process is very clear. There is nothing in the legal folks that talk about anyone taking a waiver from any kind of stipend. So that is not part of the language. So our job was to make sure principals following the contract. And I think Karen should stand with me to make sure the union delegate is following the contract as well, so the process becomes CPS.
If everybody does this, if every school does it, how are you going to pay for it? You took away the school board cried poverty. You're now offering $150,000 per school and the 2% for each teacher. If they all fall in line, where's the money?
Well, first of all, if you see that we've been talking about the elementary schools who are doing this, we've not had a high school even come to us to look at this. When we made the offer, the 2% of stipend offer, we actually had gone through a pretty good exercise in finding about $30 million in reducing the bureaucracy further to fund the elementary schools. Let me finish, thank you. The 2% further for the elementary schools. So we reduced the bureaucracy, again on paper, looking at $30 million. We don't anticipate spending more than $7 million if a lot more schools actually jump on this. But even if every single elementary school in the city would do this, for January, we're talking about $15 million.